All right, so away we go. We have an I can statement. Can I get a brave soul to read my I can statement, please and thank you? If you want to be that person, just use a little raise hand button. Awesome, Kyra, I saw your hand. Go for it.
I can identify the domain and range from a set of data of points and identify if the relation is a function.
Perfect. Yeah. So at the top of your notes, guys, if you want to fill in, if you were able to print the notes, there's a spot for the I can and the learning target. Make sure you at least get this learning target down so you know what to align it to. You can see we're doing a couple things. We're talking about domain and range. We're also talking about whether something is a relation or a function. Now, I know we talked about that in terms of like the vertical line test. There are other ways to determine if something is a relation and a function, though. So today we're going to cover those other ways. I'll give you about 15 seconds here in case you're writing this down, and then we'll get started on our content. Again, you're just writing down the learning target and potentially the I can statement. All right, here we go. If you were on the Jamboard, I am moving all the way to frame 4. So on frame 4, we have 3 definitions that we're going to write up, and these are going to be like the shortest definitions ever. So let's start off with these bottom 2. These are things that you saw if you did your Edpuzzle yesterday. You saw these 2 definitions, and we briefly talked about it in our Do Now today. So I'm going to kind of gloss over this. If I go too fast, though, you got to let me know and raise your hand. Our domain, the shortest definition ever, our domain is all of the X values, or we can call them inputs. So in a function and relation, there are inputs and outputs. Your domain is going to be all the inputs, and in an ordered pair, if we think like X comma Y, all of these X values, those will be what your domain it consists of. All right, if our domain is all of our X values, what do you think our range is, guys? Oops, sorry. Yeah, killing it. Our ranges are Y values. Perfect. Or we could say outputs. So in my ordered pair, if I'm given a list of ordered pairs, now instead of my X values, I am looking at my Y values. And then for this word relation, this is a very broad thing. Basically, any set of ordered pairs, any points on a graph, really any combination of inputs and outputs is going to be a relation. So I'm just going to put a set of input and output values. Oh, looks like there's no space. And output values. Now remember, for a function, we had to meet certain criteria, but a relation is basically any numbers that are inputs and outputs. All right, now I'm going to give you guys about 10 more seconds just in case you're writing this along with me. If I'm going too fast, you got to raise your hand. Oh, yeah, cool. What's up?
So a single dot on a graph would be a relation, just like 2, 1?
Technically, yeah.
Okay, cool.
I know we don't like to think it's that simplistic, but yeah, any inputs and outputs, definitely. All right, so now we're going to get into some examples. And if you did that Edpuzzle, this is going to feel very familiar. I promise I'm not trying to trick you. I feel like this learning target, people tend to overthink it because they think it can't be this easy. It really is just making a list of numbers. So away we go. I'm going to go on to frame 5 if you're on the Jamboard, so you can follow along with me. All right, on frame 5, we see 2 different ways that I can describe a relation. So this first way on the left, I have a set of ordered pairs, X and Y. On the right, I have a table. Both are valid ways of describing a relation, and in both cases, I want to find the domain and range. So I'm going to ask that you guys really tune in here because you're going to be doing this in a moment yourself. Let's go through, and for me, I'm going to start with the ordered pairs. For me, it's easiest to underline all of my X values in a color and then underline all my Y values in another color. If you don't have colors, like different colors you can use, just underline your X's and circle your Y's. That'll work. So here we go. My X's are going to be green. I'm going to underline all my X's. And my Y's, let's make them blue. I was going to say red, but that'd be too Christmassy. So domain. Domain, are we going to list our X's or our Y's? Yes, Akaya, thank you. Domain, we're going to list our X values. So I'm literally going to make a list, but there are two stipulations, okay? So on your piece of paper, as you're writing down domain and range, there are two stipulations when we're writing this. The first thing is that they have to be listed in order. So list in order from least to greatest. So make sure it's from smallest to biggest. The second stipulation is that we don't write repeat numbers. So if you have 2 8s in either your domain and range, you're not going to write 8 2 times. You're going to write 8 once. So let's go through. As I'm making my list, all of my X values are my green ones. I'm going to start with my smallest number, which in this case would be -3. And I'm going to write that in squiggly brackets to describe that as our solution set. So I have -3. Now I'm only going to write -3 twice. Even though I see it as 2 X values, I'm only going to write it once because I don't want to repeat both of them. I think I said I was only going to write it twice. I'm only going to write it once. I'm not going to write it twice. Now I'm going to list my second smallest, which is -2. Remember, always start with your negatives. Then I move on to 1 and to 3. And what I like to do after I write my list of domain and range, I like to just go back and double check that I haven't written any repeats and that they're all in order. So check and check. I am good to go. Now let's move on to our range. So here, our range, I am going to list again from smallest to biggest and no repeat numbers. So our smallest number is -4. I'm looking at my Y values now for range. So I'm going to have my squiggly brackets, -4. Then I'm going to have 0, 1, 2, and 5. And if I make a mistake today, guys, you just got to let me know. It's a Friday. All right, after our first example, let's get a scale of 1 to 5 where you guys are at. 1 being, I don't get this. 5 being, I can do this in my sleep. Hey, look at all those 5s. I love to see it. Perfect. Yeah, I told you guys, it looks really scary when you're throwing out new words, and we have this this set of ordered pairs, but we're really just making lists. We're just sorting things into different categories, sorting our X's, sorting our Y's, and making sure that the lists are pretty. So now let's move on to our domain and range. Domain, remember, domain is all of our X values, and we have those 2 rules, okay? So let's look. Right now, my X values are this first column. It's the same thing, just looks a little bit different in a table versus ordered pairs. The table, I think, is almost a little easier because it's already sorted for us. Let's see if these are in order. So, guys, are these in order? Help me out. Yes or no, are these in order? Yeah, definitely we go from smallest to biggest, -4, -2, 1, 2, and 5, all in order. Have I repeated any numbers in this list? Nope. So I am literally just going to write as is. I don't have to even change anything here. How cool is that? Oh, Kyra, yeah. So Kyra, you looked at this Y column. We do have some repeats in our Y's. Yeah, definitely. So as I'm writing this next one, my range, I'm going to make sure that I don't write 2 zeros. I'm only going to write 1 0. And our range also is not in order. So I am going to have to rearrange this a little bit. I'm going to start with my negative most value, which would be -2. Then I go to -1, Then I get to, I have my 2 zeros here. I'm just going to write it once. And then 3. And boom, we are done. If the 2 is a negative in the other, I get that question a lot, Akaya. Good one. So it has to be exactly the same to be considered a repeat. So if there's one negative and one positive, those are different numbers. So you will write both the negative and the positive one. Good question. Any other questions? I love it. Keep them coming. I hope I answered your question, Akaya, and that made sense to you. Cool. All right. So then I'm going to move on to frame 6. Kyra, you have a question. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so if we have the same number on X and Y, I don't know how to explain it, but like, you know how we can't repeat it with X? So if like Y has the same number as X, will we still repeat it?
Yeah, so if like X has a 1 in it and Y has a 1 in it, they're separate things. So that's okay if there's a repeat number with an X and a Y. You just don't want to have 2 repeat X's or 2 repeat Y's.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, good question. I love it. You guys are awesome this morning. All right, so let's see how you guys do. I have on frame 6, I have an example for you to try. So I'm going to play some music and give you guys about a minute to see if we can get our domain and range. I will be calling on some people, so make sure you're ready. All right, as you guys can see, I put 2 names on the screen. I'm going to ask that Aiden give me my domain of this relation and that Shannon give me the range. So Aiden and Shannon, you can either unmute yourselves or you can throw it in the chat, whatever is easiest to you. I'll give you a couple seconds while the rest of us wrap up that problem. Remember our 2 rules, write them in order, and make sure we don't write any repeats if there are any. All right, Shannon, you are my range person. And Shannon said -4. Yep. -3. Good. -2. -1. And 4. Yeah, and if you guys see, I'm crossing them out as I go. If that helps you do it, that's fine. Aiden, you are listing the X values. So all of your Y's have already been eliminated. You're literally listing the numbers that are left. You're giving me the X values. All you have to do is put them in order and make sure you don't write any repeats if there are any. So I'll give you a second. List those in order for me, Aiden. Uh-oh, it looks like we forgot some negatives. Let's see if we can get some help. Cole, can you help us out here? You can either unmute or throw it in the chat. Yeah, cool.
Yep, sorry, I wasn't unmuted. I got -1, 2, 0, and 5.
Oh, uh-oh. Look at how I have this written, Cole. What mistake did you make?
I didn't put it in smallest to greatest, so -1, 0, 2, 5.
There you go. Now we got it. Awesome. Thank you, Cole. So Aiden, I'm going to come back to you. Do you see how what we did is we took all of our X values and we listed them in order here? Oh, it looks like we messed up. Actually, this -2 has to come first. Ah! No, +2? We just missed a number. That's what we did. -2. There we go. Woo! Now we got it. All right. I'm going to pause in case there are any other questions. I want to make sure we're literally listing X's and Y's, and I don't want to lose you guys on this skill because we're going to go to our, we're going to make it just a little bit trickier in this next one. All right. I am actually going to skip ahead just to make sure we get to this. I'm going to skip ahead to, we're starting at frame 9 now. Frame 9 is relation versus function. So again, if you watched your ed puzzle, this should be pretty easy. We're going to go through it kind of quickly. If you're confused, you got to let me know. And then I'm going to circle back to those previous slides. So frame 9, relation versus function. We already looked at the vertical line test to help us determine that, but we can also figure that out based on numbers. So I am going to move to frame 11. Here we go. Frame 11. How can we do this with ordered pairs? So to determine if something is a function or relation from the ordered pairs, look at the X values. That's going to be your key, right? If you see any repeat X's, so if there are any times that X is repeated, if you see any repeat X values, it is not a function. Oh, my calibration's off. There we go. So if there are any repeat X's, it is not a function. So we've talked about sorting them. Now we're determining if it's a function or not. So let's look at this first example. I'm going to do 2, and then I'm going to have you guys try some out here. So here we go. I'm going to underline all my X's just so I have a good idea of what's going on. So all my X values in this possible function are 5, 3, 2, 0, and -1. Do we see any repeat X values? Do we see any repeat X values? No, we do not. There are no repeats. None of those are the same number. So that means that we pass our test. That means no repeats. So it is a function. If it passes that test, it's a function. We're good to go. All right, now let's look at number 2. Again, I'm going to underline all those X values. I don't care if Y's repeat. I know that sounds silly. Y's don't matter when we're determining if something is a function or not. We only care about the X's. So now let's look. Do we see any repeat X's here, guys? Akaya sees a repeat X. Akaya, which one is repeating? 2, we have a couple of 2s there. I got a 2 here and a 2 here. So repeats exist. Oh no. That means it is not a function. Or we can say it is a relation. All right, I'm going to pause in case you guys are writing stuff down, this will give you a little bit of time. Also, I want to know if there are any questions. If you have questions, you can raise your hand or throw it in the chat. And lastly, I do want a scale from 1 to 5, telling me how well you understand. 1 being, I don't get what we just did. 5 being, I totally got this, miss. I love the exclamation points. Awesome. Yeah, those of you that watched your Edpuzzle, you definitely got a leg up here. But if you didn't watch your Edpuzzle, that's why we're going back through it. Just a quick brief to make sure that we didn't miss anybody. Loving the 5s. I'm hoping that the rest of us are following along still. It seems like we may have missed a few of you guys. Please make sure you are not tuning me out. Yeah, Unit 6 is, I think Unit 6 is a little easier than Unit 5 for sure, Kyra. Yeah, definitely a way to boost the grade at the end of the year. All right, now let's look. Of course, you know I had to do this to you guys. We have to see it in different formats. So let's look at this format. Our table, again, it lays it out very clearly for us. We have a column of X's and a column of Y's. Do I care about the Y values when I'm determining if something is a function? Do I care about the Y's? Nope, Y's do not matter to me at all. I am only looking at the X values. So look at the X values with me. Cami, do you think looking at these X values, do you think that this is a function or not a function? Yeah, it is a function. Good job, Cami. Why is it a function, guys? Yeah, I see a hand up. Cole?
It's in the chat already.
Yeah, sorry. There are no repeats. Awesome. So it is a function. It would also pass the vertical line test. Now let's look at this mapping diagram. This mapping diagram, if we look over here, it looks like there are no repeats. However, no, you're fine, Kara. Don't apologize. However, what do we notice about this mapping diagram? Anybody notice anything? Cole? Yeah.
-1 has 2 separate outputs.
I love it. And I love that you use the terminology. That's so good. Yes, -1. If we look, -1 has an arrow going to 2 different values. If that happens, that means that -1 is being used twice. So for our mapping, if there are 2 arrows from one X, that means it is not a function. Because -1 would be, yeah, so -1 would be used twice. So this is not a function, or as Kyra said, we could call it a relation. Awesome. I'm going to pause in case there are any questions here. Nobody? All right, so now I'm going to backtrack a little bit real quick, go through one more example here. Domain and range from a graph. All right, so this is a little bit trickier than that domain and range from list, and this was not in the Edpuzzle. Can it have more than 2 arrows? Yeah, Kaya, if it has more than 2 arrows, it's definitely not a function. So any more, maybe I should say 2+ arrows in my notes. Yeah, if there were 3, if there were 4, it's just, that's definitely not right. We only are allowed to have 1. Good question. All right, I'm backtracking to frame 7. So on frame 7, our domain and our range, we know that domain is all the X values. On a graph, that means something a little bit different. Domain, if we think about our X values, so if I think about my X axis, we see that that X axis is describing how we move left and right. So for our domain, we're going to go from the farthest left point to the farthest right. And this one was not on your Edpuzzle, so you're going to want to make sure you're tuning in. Then for our range, if I think about, we know that ranges are y values. So if I think about my y-axis, this describes how much we're moving up and down. So we're going to go from our farthest, or sorry, from our lowest to our highest point. And we're going to list those. So what I like to do, I like to draw little bounds for myself. So we said domain is the farthest left and the farthest right. So I'm going to go to the farthest left point on my graph here, and I'm going to draw myself a little boundary. And then I'm going to go to the farthest right, and I'm going to do the same thing. Right? So that would help us figure out what our domain is. I'll talk about how to write that in notation in a moment. Then I'm going to look at my range. So my range, we said, is our lowest to our highest. Again, I like to draw my little boundaries. So I'm going to go to my lowest point on my graph, which would be down here. That's my lowest value. And I'm going to draw my little boundary here. And then my highest point, if I look, the tallest part of my graph is right here. So I'm going to draw my little boundary there. And the reason I'm extending these lines is to make sure that they go through the axes so I can kind of tell where they're at. All right, then I list my domain and range. So our domain is our blue lines. Can somebody give me a value for my farthest left point here? It's my farthest left point. Well, I can't tell if you had your hand up a while ago or if you just raised it.
I just raised it.
Okay, yeah, what's our farthest left point?
-2, -1.
Yeah, so you only need the x value. I don't even need the y value, just -2. Because domain is the x's. And then our farthest right point, if I look on my x-axis, that's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we go from -2 to 5. And for the y value, my lowest point here would be -2. And again, the reason I'm doing that is because it's my y value. And my highest point would be 1. And boom, I have my domain and range. The only thing I need to do is decide how to write my brackets or parentheses. Parentheses is for an open circle. Brackets is for closed. So we can see over here that this left point, that is closed. The right point is open. I've kind of colored over it, but hopefully you guys can see that. So for this, I'm going to put one bracket and one parenthesis. My left one was closed. My right one was open. Then for this one, my lowest point, that was open. So I'm going to put a parenthesis. And my top spot, that is a solid line. So I'm going to put a bracket. Casimir, where did I lose you?
I mean, I wasn't really paying attention, so I had to let my dogs out. But I get back, and you're talking open circle bracket. I don't know what's going on.
Oh no! All right, you guys. So we will go back over this 3.0. I promise you. For now, let's have you guys fill out. There is an exit ticket here. I want you to try your best on it. All I'm asking is that there are like 4 questions. Try to pick out your domain and range. If this 3.0 didn't make sense to you, we're going to go back over it again at a later point. Try not to stress too much. If you're really curious about it, you can shoot me an email and I can maybe explain it a little bit better. But again, we'll go back through it a little bit more later on.
Have a nice day.